closest, the El Cortez, for people who don't know, is next door to the Ogden. You walk out of the Ogden, you walk across the street, you're inside the El Cortez.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? Mm-hmm. New girlfriend.
Yeah.
Now, also reports when he's in Mandalay Bay, these reports of him being with a mystery woman. You can go back to us now. These reports of him being with a mystery woman.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, you talk about 9 times out of 10 when someone gets murdered, the spouse did it, and we said cheating is a possible motivation. Now, let's talk about the prospective spouse, because there are some interesting things about her as well that are some inconsistencies. Mm-hmm. This is Mary Lou Danley. Let's listen to the official story, which is the statement. Now, mind you, one thing that we said is no one has seen Mary Lou Danley.
Right.
You've seen pictures from her Facebook page.
And on Google and all that stuff.
But you've never seen a video of her.
No.
She's never given an interview.
Mm-hmm.
You've never talked to anybody who saw her on any of the airplanes she was traveling on. Nothing. As a matter of fact, the gate agents didn't even see her because supposedly when she got to LAX, the FBI grabbed her and took her out another exit.
Right.
To try to stay away from the crowds or whatever. Okay. Let's go with the statement. This is all we have. A statement read by her lawyer. Go ahead, this is a statement.
I have a statement to read from my client, Mary Lou Danley. I am devastated by the deaths and injuries that have occurred, and my prayers go out to the victims and their families, and all those who have been hurt by these awful events. I have faith in God, and I will continue to pray for everyone who has been harmed or hurt. I am a mother and a grandmother, and my heart breaks for all who have lost loved ones. I knew Schützen Paddock as a kind, caring, quiet man. I loved him and hoped for a quiet future together with him. He never said anything to me or took any action that I was aware of that I understood in any way to be a warning that something horrible like this was going to happen. A little more than 2 weeks ago, Schützen told me he'd found a cheap ticket for me to the Philippines and that he wanted me to take a trip home to see my family. Like all Filipinos abroad, I was excited to go home and see family and friends. While there, he wired me money, which he said was for me to buy a house for me and my family. I was grateful, but honestly, I was worried that first, the unexpected trip home and then the money was a way of breaking up with me. It never occurred to me in any way whatsoever that he was planning violence against anyone. I have not made a statement until now because I have been cooperating with the authorities, and I voluntarily flew back to America because I know that the FBI and Las Vegas Police Department wanted to talk to me, and I want to talk to them. I will cooperate fully with their investigation. Anything I can do to help ease suffering and help in any way, I will do. Please respect my privacy and my family's privacy. Thank you.
Okay, but the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, no matter how bad they want to talk to her, have not talked to her.
Not.
No one has talked to her except for the FBI who took her off the plane. Now, if we are to take Mary Lou Danley at her word, she was under the impression that she was getting broken up with.
Right.
Now, that doesn't come out of the blue. That doesn't come out of the blue that someone thinks they're getting broken up with. Also, all we know about this ticket is that Mary Lou Danley in a statement, if that's Mary Lou Danley who wrote the statement, we don't even know that that's what she said. Claims he bought the ticket. He found a ticket for her, bought it for her, and said you should go. Found a cheap ticket and said you should go. This is a guy who's a multi-millionaire, who he cares about finding a cheap ticket to the Philippines.
Right, exactly.
Found a cheap ticket and you should go. Then he wires her $100,000 when she's in the Philippines. Wires her $100,000. So you live with somebody, you want to give them $100,000, you put them on a plane, and then you wait to wire it to them in the Philippines. Does this woman not have a fucking bank account? Wires her $100,000. Now, there's some weird things about Mary Lou Danley, so let's look at this. Let's look at her trip timeline here. So she arrived in Manila on September 15th. Remember, the 14th is when this dude is first spotted downtown. More than 2 weeks before the mass shooting in Las Vegas, then flew to Hong Kong on September 22nd and returned to Manila on September 25th. She was there until she flew to LAX on Tuesday night, according to Philippine immigration officials who spoke on condition of anonymity. Those 2 dates. So she flies to Manila, and then she flies to Hong Kong on the 22nd through the 25th. Well, isn't that convenient that that's exactly the same dates as the Life is Beautiful festival?
Right.
Isn't that weird? I mean, I'm sure it's just coincidence. I'm sure it's just coincidence that at the time that Life is Beautiful is going on, that she happens to be in Hong Kong, not Manila. Okay, so let's look at that. Let's look at this graphic so that you can see basically how this looks. So she gets to Tokyo, Japan. Then she flies from Tokyo to Manila. She gets to Manila on the 15th. Then she goes from Manila to Hong Kong on the 22nd, flies back on the 25th, and then October 3rd, she's back in the U.S. Okay, fine. So now let's talk about what's interesting about this. On her return, let's look at this return. This is her return document. Mary Lou Danley. This is the picture ID of Mary Lou Danley, who arrived in the United States Tuesday, October 3rd. A Philippine Bureau of Immigration officials told ABS-CBN that Danley had flown from Manila on September 22nd to Hong Kong for a 4-day trip and returned to Manila from Hong Kong on September 25th via Cebu Pacific flight. There's a number using an Australian passport. On Tuesday, ABC News reported Danley was en route to the U.S. within 24 hours, but did not specify from which country she was coming. Her public profile describes her as gambling and casino professional, and has resided in Reno, Nevada during the last 20 years, which could also make her either a U.S. immigrant or a U.S. citizen. And you see that this is an Australian passport, a photo of an Australian passport that she's using to travel. Wow. So come back to us, Christian. This should raise a lot of questions.
Yeah.
This woman's traveling on an Australian passport. What do we know about this? So she's born in Philippines, but she has an Australian passport, and she lives and has been living in the U.S.
The U.S., yeah.
for 20 some odd years. This is normal? This is normal? I looked at this and I said, traveling on an Australian passport?
That's fucking weird.
Traveling on an Australian passport? So is she an Australian citizen? And if so, she's just here on a green card? But she was married to an American.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out she was married to an Australian first. That's how she got her Australian citizenship. Then she came to the States. She married the guy Danley, Gary Danley. She was married to him for 15 years. So I said, wow, she's married to him for 15 years. And she didn't get a U.S. citizenship. But then I was like, oh, but she couldn't have had both. So maybe she is an Australian citizen.
Yeah, that's weird.
Let's go to dual citizen. Got it? Dual citizen?
Yes, yeah.
This is from the Australian Immigration Bureau. Dual citizenship. It is possible to hold citizenship for 2 or more countries if the law of those countries allow. This is known as dual or multiple citizenship. People can become dual citizens automatically or after being granted citizenship of another country. For example, an Australian citizen may automatically gain citizenship of another country through marriage, while a permanent resident of Australia may become a dual citizen by becoming an Australian citizen. Prior to 4th of April 2002, Australian citizens who became citizens of another country lost their Australian citizenship automatically. So, Christian, what do you how likely do you think it is that it's after 2002, this law passes, she can become a dual citizen, she's been married to an American for the requisite amount of time, which is how long? Let's go with naturalized here, the very next one. Naturalization for spouses. In general, you may qualify for naturalization if you have been a permanent resident, green card holder for at least 3 years, have been living in marital union with the same U.S. citizen spouse during such a time, meet all other eligibility requirements under this section. So, we've got, Christian, come on back to us, we've got the most likely scenario. We've got someone who's a dual citizen with 2 passports. 2 passports. Traveling on an Australian passport. 2 passports. Remember that.
Key.
Is that normal?
No.
Is it normal for someone born in Philippines to have dual citizenship in Australia and the United States? Is that normal?
Not whatsoever.
No. So she's already kind of an abnormal person. And just so happens to be out of the country when her boyfriend goes on a crazy shooting spree that no one can explain the motive. And during that time, just so happens that he wires her $100,000. That's not suspicious. That's not fucking suspicious at all. So what else do we know about her? This is one thing that nobody had really looked into. So her profile says that she is a gambling and casino professional, right? Let's go with this jobs thing. So this is about how they met. Eventually around this is from CNN, just a piece of an article. Eventually around 2012, Paddock began spending more time in Reno and sticking to his pattern, began buying property there. He also found a girlfriend, although it's not clear how they met. Mary Lou Danley's job may have been the connection. An Australian citizen and former airline hostess and Avon sales representative, she worked for a time as a hostess to high-limit gamblers at Club Paradise at the Atlantis Casino Resort Spa. Now, Christian, it's been reported that that is how they met, that he was a high roller, she was a hostess to high-limit gamblers at Club Paradise. Right. That's where he was. Come back to us, dude. What I found interesting when I saw that is I was like, former airline hostess?
Yeah.
What do we know about this? The only place that this... Oh, there you go. Screw that in. The only place that this came up, that I found this, and I think that this is the original source for this, go to this Reno thing. Got Reno?
Job 2?
No, Reno. It's a way above that.
Oh, there we go.
Got it. So this is from the San Jose Mercury News. And this is a little bit about their situation in Reno. According to court records, Danley had been living in Nevada and appears to have been living with Paddock as early as August 2013, while she was still married to another man named Gary Danley. Gary and Mary Lou Danley were married in Las Vegas in 1990. According to court records, they jointly filed for divorce on February 25th, 2015, and the divorce was finalized the next day. During her divorce, Mary Lou Danley listed a downtown Reno apartment as her address. Property records show the apartment was owned by shooting suspect Stephen Paddock. So, hold on. Here we have Stephen Paddock putting his girlfriend up in an apartment. Pattern. All right. At one point, this is interesting. At one point, Danley worked for an airline based out of the Bay Area, said a longtime neighbor in Reno where Danley and Paddock lived together in a retirement community. She later worked for Avon, the cosmetic sales company, and tried to sell their products to other residents, Elizabeth Teil said. Danley traveled all the time, and when she was at the home she shared with Paddock in a retirement community in Reno, it was never for very long. Teil said Danley would show up every 3 or 4 months and stay for no more than 10 days. So leave this on, Christian. This is important. 2012, Paddock shows up in Reno. From August 2013, this woman is living with Stephen Paddock. Okay? They meet when she's a casino host. The weirdest thing about this is, while they're living together, a neighbor in Reno says she starts working for an airline based out of the Bay Area. Now, she's got a LinkedIn profile, doesn't list her working for an airline. She's got a Facebook, doesn't list her as working for an airline. She's got no Facebook pictures of her with her airline friends. She's got none of that. This, again, is this again is something very, very strange. So, also the fact that she's leaving, all right? She's not working for Avon when she's gone for 3 to 4 months and then only back for 10 days at a time. Now, if she's leaving for 3 to 4 months, she's not in Reno, she's not working at the Atlantis. Now, has she stopped working altogether? She's not working for fucking Avon, being gone for 3 to 4 months.
Nope.
So, the only other job that the neighbor knows, she's working for an airline that she has never mentioned in anything, and an airline that supposedly is based out of the Bay Area. Okay? So, as I said last week, the key for me in this whole thing was Janet Air. Janet Air is an airline. Now, Janet Air is based out of Las Vegas. Okay, that's fine. Or is it, right? Or is it? So let's go, where are we? Employment, let's go Reno. Is this Reno?
We're on Reno right now.
So let's go properties. To get a timeline, because this is interesting. So, this is from Time Money. This is about Paddock's properties and the timeline of him buying them. So he lived with his girlfriend in an upscale 55-plus retirement community in Mesquite, about 80 miles from Las Vegas. He bought the 2018 square foot home in 2015 for $369,000, according to the Review Journal. Actually, what it says in the Review Journal is he bought this home in January of 2015 in Las Vegas. Mary Lou Danley filed for and received a divorce in February of 2015. He also paid $238,000 in 2013 for a home in the Sierra Canyon by Del Webb community in Reno, where properties now list for $300,000 to $600,000. That was where he lived with Danley. In addition, the Reno Gazette-Journal reported that Paddock owned a condo at the Montage in downtown Reno before selling it in December 2016. That condo is the apartment that Mary Lou Danley was listing. Okay, so what we have here is a decision being made to move sticks in 2015 to move down to Las Vegas from Reno. He owns 2 properties in Reno. A decision is made to move down. He buys a house in January. In February, Mary Lou Danley files, you can come back to us. In February, Mary Lou Danley files for divorce. What does this tell me? What this tells me is this woman, Mary Lou Danley, is looking for a bigger commitment.
Yeah.
She says, we need to be living together. Right? I don't want to be spending this time of us apart. Let's spend time together. And in spending time together, he decides to move to Las Vegas. Right outside Las Vegas. Now, that must mean that where Mary Lou Danley had been those 3 or 4 months was down in Las Vegas.
Right.
Doing what? Working what job? Was she working at a casino? Absolutely not. How do we know that? Nobody's come forward and said they fucking worked with her. What's she doing in Vegas? What's Mary Lou Danley doing in Vegas? And what's up with this airline that she's working for that's based out of the Bay Area? So let's look at, why don't you throw up Janet Op? This is when we start getting into it. I mentioned Janet Air before. Janet Air is 1 block away from where the shooting happened. This is from Wikipedia. This is their operation section. Due to the airline's secretive nature, little is known about its organization. It is operated for the U.S. Air Force by infrastructure and defense contractor ACOM through ACOM's acquisition in 2014 of URS Corporation, which acquired EG&G Technical Services in 2012 as derived from URS's history of providing this service to the Air Force and job openings published by URS. For example, in 2010, URS announced it would be hiring Boeing 737 flight attendants to be based in Las Vegas, requiring applicants to undergo a single-scope background investigation in order to be able to obtain a top-secret security clearance. So let's first say, what is a single-scope background investigation? So go single-scope. So it's a type of security clearance required for top-secret access. So they look at they check you through your national agencies, they check your birth, they do a subject interview, they check who you live with, all of these things. Citizenship, must be a U.S. citizen. Independent verification of citizenship received directly from the appropriate registration authority. Which would make sense why the story needs to stay that she's an Australian citizen if she's been working for Janet Eyre, which also, as a dual citizen and someone with a plausible deniability of citizenship, makes her a good potential candidate. In addition, probably doesn't hurt that you're living with somebody who had previously had security clearance because he'd been cleared by Lockheed Martin. We'll talk about that a little more. Let's look at what one of these this job opening for flight attendants. There was one hidden way back that someone had posted on their blog from 2010, a flight attendant blog. Here it is. EGG, AK Janet, Las Vegas. Company name, URS Corporation. Position, B737 flight attendant. Full-time, regular hire. High school graduate, must present a neat professional appearance. Must pass company-operated jet aircraft emergency training and initial flight attendant training and maintain currency as flight attendant. Must be able to qualify for and maintain a top secret security clearance. Possess a valid current state driver's license. Let's go next. Let's say you want to apply. Address, headquarters, 600 Montgomery Street, 26th floor, San Francisco, California. So, Christian, what we have here is we have an airline based in Las Vegas. No, an airline headquartered in the Bay Area, just as was said by the neighbor, that flies out of Las Vegas, that flies out of the top secret location 1 block away from the shooting, with a woman who we don't know where the fuck she was working, but clearly was down in Las Vegas, who is a dual citizen, who there's questionable shit around this guy, who's with the guy who used to work for Lockheed, and we don't really know for how long, and we don't know what security clearance he had. And it's even conceivable that he still had some friends, because when you get a new girlfriend, right, he meets this woman, she's working at Atlantis Casino in Reno. He's trying to show off for her. She starts living with him. I don't want you working in that casino anymore. I'll call a few friends. I bet I know a job you could get. Calls up his Lockheed guys. Oh yeah, they've got some flight attendants, that we fly out to the testing range, Janet Eyre. And then, she's working for them. Okay, so here we go. Moving forward. So let's look. We'll look at URS and ACOM. So these are the companies. As you see, their headquarters, Transamerica Pyramid, San Francisco, California. They were acquired by ACOM. Let's go to ACOM. ACOM is who runs Janet Eyre. All right. Now, let's talk about... So now, Christian, we've developed this out. This is the theory. You can come back to us. So this is the background. This is now, again, I'm only telling a story. I'm only telling a story with pieces that fit.
Right.
Now, I said from the beginning that Janet Eyre was a key. Before I knew anything about Mary Lou Danley. Before I knew anything about Schützen Paddock. Before I knew anything, Janet Eyre is a key.
Just off of the principle that you talked about earlier.
If a crime occurs and there's somebody... So, if there's... Like I said, if there's a rapist, if a rape occurs in a neighborhood and a rapist lives down the block, you knock on his door.
Exactly. Yeah,
if a whole bunch of people get killed by military weapons, now these are military, automatic, can't be got by civilians. A whole bunch of people get killed with military weapons under mysterious circumstances, and on that block there is a top secret military weapons testing facility. You at least knock on the door. But the only problem is, you can't knock on the door. You can't knock on the door, Janet Eyre. And let's show people so that they understand because, see, I knew this because I used that road.
Right.
Not only have I been right next to Janet Eyre because I've been to Ernie Moody's hangar and I've seen these planes up close, I use that road. Like, it's hard to understand just how close we're talking about. I'm going to try to show it.
Right.
Because once you know how close it is, you're like, oh, shit. Okay, so let's go map. This is the map. What you see is Mandalay Bay on the left-hand side. you see Janet Air on the right-hand side, and sort of triangle in between. So you've got this block in the middle, then it's Janet Air, and at the top, middle area, you see where the festival was taking place. Now, to show you just exactly why Janet Air makes sense to me in this case, throw up this trajectory. What I did was I took a line. I drew a line from Stephen Paddock's room to the center, right dead in front of the stage. Then I took that same line, same length, same angle, and I just flipped it horizontally, attached it to itself.
Wow.
And where does it land you? Literally at the doorstep of Janet Air. It lands you on their parking lot. That's just coincidence?
That's crazy.
Because, here's one thing. That location and room was chosen. Could have chose Tropicana, could have chose Luxor. As a matter of fact, Luxor is actually closer. Could have chose Tropicana, could have chose Luxor. Didn't. Chose Mandalay Bay. Why? Why? So that people can get an idea. Let's go to this from stage. This is, I went to Google Maps. This is looking, you're basically standing just right to the right of the stage. You're standing in the road. The stage almost abuts the road. You're looking straight forward. If you look down that road, to the right of those fuel tanks is the Janet Air parking lot. Mm-hmm. Now let's look at it looking from Janet Air, so from the lot. You can see this is you standing basically on the Janet Air parking lot corner. Looking, you can, that little black line that you see going there, that's the fence of the place. You can shout. You can shout to the venue.
Crazy.
From the parking lot of Janet Air. Now, let's see what a drone view looks like. This is a drone. Now, before I had said that I believe that the drones moved around. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that these drones were, for the most part, stationary over the Janet Air parking lot. Look at what this view looks like. Mm-hmm. This is a drone hovering above the Janet Air parking lot. Look at that shot. Look at that shot.
Wow.
This is directly over the Janet Air parking lot. So people are like, that drone doesn't exist. That drone doesn't exist, and even this doesn't even make sense. We're going to show a timeline. Show this check here. Now you see the Hebrew in the background, and you see that this big check says Duke, $100,000. Big old check. Now, what is this check for? Let's go to award. This is from Geek Time, and this is the only article about this, and it's very, very important. Where is it? Let me get it here. Oh, do I not have it? This is a U.S. Defense Department comes to Tel Aviv looking for military innovation. Here we go. Very important. This is from June 7th, 2016, last year. After months of entries and a long selection process, Israeli defense and security startups gathered on Monday for the now annual Combating Terrorism Technology Conference held next to the Tel Aviv University campus. Sponsored by the United States Defense Department's Combating Terrorism Technical Support Office, Israel's Ministry of Defense, Directorate of Defense Research and Development, and the MIT Enterprise Forum of Israel, the competition sought out the most innovative technologies for deployment with the U.S. security and military forces. As with last year's event, a $100,000 prize was hanging in the balance for the security-related startup with the winning ideas. Additionally, this year, a new mobile apps category was added with another $100,000 for the taking. Over 120 different startups sent entries, which were reviewed by panels of experts in different fields that could sort through the fray of different technologies, ranging from hardware, personnel tracking, computer vision and image mapping, cybersecurity, and many others. In the end, Gideon Miller of the MIT Enterprise Forum, who helped make this day happen, told Geek Time that 10 companies made it into the general competition while another 9 came to the mobile section. That part's important. These entries were reviewed by panels of experts in different fields that could sort through the technologies, meaning the complete breakdown of these technologies were given to the Department of Defense. They went through with a fine-tooth comb to see which ones were good, and here's from the article again. At the end of the day, Duke Robotics System, which developed a stabilization system that allows for drones of all sorts to carry different forms of peripheral add-ons, including firearms, won first place and a nice chunk of change in their pockets. The checks and certificates were presented to the participants by U.S. Ambassador Daniel Shapiro. That guy holding the other side of that check is the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Daniel Shapiro, who spoke about the importance of mutual work on developing important technologies for defense, including the detection of tunnels from the Gaza Strip, interception of rockets like with the Iron Dome system, and other advances in technology that benefit both Israeli and American forces. The ambassador told the crowd that he was impressed by the range of ideas that are making the world a safer place. In attendance of the event were this is Combating Terrorism Office, Chief of Staff Adam Tarsi, and the MIT chief scientist Dov Oster, who spoke to the audience about their impressions of this year's crop of companies. This is important. The guy from the Department of Defense, Tarsi, this is what he says. Tarsi, who's been coming to Israel for over a decade, seeking out great technologies to integrate into the U.S. defense base, told Geek Time that, quote, the overall level of the contestants rose dramatically this year. There were a couple of really good ones last year and some that needed a lot of work. This year there was a much more polish, and the general level of applicability and innovation was 2 steps of where it was last year. So we went from having, on a scale of 1 to 10, a lot of 3s, 4s, and 5s, to having 7s and 8s, and things that we really had to struggle with to get first and second place. With the stiff competition of great startups came some difficult decisions, Tarsi says, that in choosing their winner, they wanted to see real innovation. Quote, we're looking for things that are really novel, but it's hard to find bolts of lightning. Not everything is coming out of nowhere and game-changing technology, he said to Geek Time. Unlike other sorts of tech investors that can play a long game on an interesting idea, Tarsi is representing the American security establishment and is pressed to find solutions that will directly address the needs of the people in the field. This is important. Quote, we looked at how can I see an operator using this technology in the near future, he explains, pointing to Duke as an example of the types of solutions that appeal to him. It was ready to go in an application that we thought that our tactical users, our guys in the field, would be able to utilize in the near term, explains Tarsi. So, Christian, what we have is last year, the technology that enables a drone, and we'll show what this technology is. Go ahead and put up gimbal. This is the technology. It's basically a system that attaches to a drone, that allows small arms to be fired. And because the problem would be that the drones would fire, you can come back to us, the drones would fire these small arms, and it would throw the drone all out of whack, right? So this gimbal allows for that, and it stabilizes, and then the drone fixes itself. Now, there's some issues with this, okay? And we see, interestingly, while all of this is happening, weirdly enough, in the same whole space, this goes from basically unknown to these guys putting it out in public. And this should give people a lot of pause. Do this promo bit. Oh, do we have it?
Yeah.
Can now be deployed to places human soldiers can't reach or simply shouldn't have to go. TCAT is able to adjust for the right place and time. The TCAT robot is designed to identify, target, and engage in real-life scenarios. TCAT takes the full recoil of the weapon discharge, compensates for its force, and quickly readjusts to stay on target and in the fight. The Defense Department chose Duke as winner of the 2016 Terror Combat Competition. The company is in the process of implementing orders from Israeli forces. Every year in the U.S., more than $150 billion is spent in R&D and acquisition of better solutions to secure our troops. The total global aerial drone market by itself is expected to reach $10 billion in 2017. Over the next several years, the military, robotic, and drone sectors will continue to lead all other sectors in drone spending. Invest in Duke Robotics. TCAT, the robot that will transform the way conflicts are being solved.
Okay, you can come back to us.
Duke. No.
Okay, so here's the deal. These guys start going after fundraising. Now, the other thing about that I found interesting about this, as I was looking at this, and a piece that stood out to me and why I said, it's not Duke. It's not these guys.
No.
It's not this thing. The reason why, as I looked further, their gimbal that they created can only do semi-automatic.
I see.
It can't stabilize enough for automatic. It can only do semi-automatic.
But the technology is there.
Well, the Defense Department has had all of their technical specs of what theirs does since June of 2016. They found it to be so valuable, they cut these guys a $100,000 check. Right? They talked about, this is the type of technology that we could use right now. Right fucking now, it's ready to go. Representative of the Department of Defense says, it's ready to go. We're paying these guys. So, this, as a tech guy, I know what this is. But now these guys are going for funding. So check out, let's just throw up this TechCrunch thing. Because I think that it's key. So, what do we got? A defense company put a machine gun on a drone. I'll just do an important part from this. So, Duke is saying that they're currently in testing with the Israeli army and that they are also doing a sort of online crowd sale for investment, which is why they produce such a titillating video. Given the current state of drone technology, a product like this would be dangerous for use in real situations, but with a bit of engineering and improvement, you could have something that could launch from a distant location, move in from the kill, and then fly back. It could also, like so many drones on the market, explode when it hits a tree. So take TCAD with a grain of salt. This is an investment strategy, not a final product, and I suspect if it were that easy to stick a gun onto a drone, we'd have something smaller than the Predator flying around. So TechCrunch is like, their product is almost ready. It's almost ready. So what do I see? What I see is this was taken by the Department of Defense. This was taken out. The technology was taken out to the testing range. They gave it to their engineers. They said, can you take this and improve it so it can do automatic weapons? They've been doing that for the last year. Now, it would make sense that they were doing it at Area 51 and the other proving grounds, which is where Janet Air flies to every day. That would make sense because that's where they would test this, because that's where they test secret aircraft. That is the location. So then they get it working and they cut these dudes loose. They cut Duke Robotics loose. They're like, no, we're good. We're not really interested in your technology anymore. Thanks. We don't need you now. And that's why these guys are going out trying to get funding. And the timing is perfect because they would be getting their funding together right around the time that their phone calls stopped getting returned, which would be right around the time that they started testing this. First on targets, small targets, things in the proving ground, whatever. I'm going to blow through some of this other stuff, okay? And I'm going to go straight to, I'm going to tell you there were reports, lots of reports. You can go check it out. I've got a thing. Savage, people were sending me stuff and I wanted to play it, but we don't have a ton of time on this, right?
Yeah.
Lots of reports of shots coming from the opposite direction.
Right.
Lots.
This doesn't make sense.
Lots.
Although I did speak to a police officer and he said that in training, he said you think the bullets would ricochet and bounce up. But what they do is they bounce and then they go across the floor horizontally about a foot to 3 feet off the floor. So he said, like, whenever we're in training, or if we're in a situation and there's a wall behind us, they say back away from the wall at least 5 feet because all the shooter has to do is shoot the wall and it'll skim across the wall.
Well, yeah. But what people are saying is that they're standing like this.
Yeah.
And that they're hit from this side.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
So now, is that potentially a ricochet? Sure, it's potentially a ricochet. But then, if people are getting hit from this side, is that not potentially also a ricochet?
Right.
Right? We've got bullets potentially coming from every direction. Where there's this other story though, and this is what I want to end with because I think that this puts the nail in the coffin that this is what was happening. And it's this tank story. Go ahead and throw up this tank story. So this is Commissioner calls for security review of jet fuel tanks after Las Vegas Strip shooting. Clark County Commissioner Chris Guillen, I can't even say her name, said Thursday she would seek a security review of the jet fuel tanks targeted Sunday by Las Vegas Strip mass murderer Schützen Paddock. The commission's vice chair said, and a possible candidate for governor next year, made her comments in the wake of a Wednesday Review Journal report that Paddock used his Mandalay Bay hotel room to fire bullets at the circular tanks. So, one round penetrated tank 202, which was partially filled with jet fuel, the airline statement said. The second round was found lodged within the same tank's outer steel shell and did not penetrate. This tank was subsequently evaluated by experts who found no evidence of smoke nor fire. Jones said the tank is being drained and will be re-inspected and repaired. A knowledgeable source said this week that both of the bullets struck near the top of the tank. So what's interesting about this story, I had posted it also on Twitter, that they had crews out there. They had cordoned it off. The FBI... I don't know if it's in this one. Here. Several airplane hangars belonging to prominent corporations are near the tanks, which sit on property owned by the airport. The tanks are operated by Swissport Fueling, the company that runs the jet fuel operations for the airport. The Review Journal reported Wednesday that FBI agents had inspected the tanks and took measurements of the line of fire from Mandalay Bay. A team of forensics experts were brought to Las Vegas from FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. So they brought a team of forensic experts from Washington, D.C. to inspect these tanks, and they're inspecting the line of fire. The FBI agents are inspecting a line of fire to Mandalay Bay for 2 holes in the tanks. I don't think that's what's happening at all. Here's what I think is happening. Now, one, they want to cordon off the area that's literally the closest thing to Janet Air, because they're examining trajectory, and they're saying bullets are coming. That's what they're examining. They're examining not the line of fire from Mandalay Bay, the line of fire to the people from the highest point. They're thinking, it looks like a sniper was on top of these things because we've got trajectory. As we do the forensics, it looks like the bullets are coming from over here. Well, where could somebody have been? They must have been on top of these tanks. Yeah. Well, we can't tell people that we think there was a shooter on top of the tanks. Tell them the tanks got hit. Tell them the tanks got hit.
Yeah, there's also 2, like, I don't even know what they are. It looks like they started building something
over there.
Yeah, 2 like frames or like I don't even know what it is. They started building something and then they stopped. And then I saw a couple videos where it talks about like there is staircases that lead up there, and there is
there are.
Yeah,
there are staircases that lead to the top of the tanks. But what
not even the tanks, but these structures. I don't even. It looks like a beam or something, like some kind of.
Who started building them?
Whoever was building whatever they were going to build there, and then they stopped.
So, needless to say, the FBI, in my opinion, what this is the FBI is pretty sure that shots came from over there. But they can't get onto the Janet Air property. And they can't let anybody know that there was a second shooter because that would jeopardize the investigation, or that they believe there was a second shooter. That would jeopardize the investigation. So there's some other interesting things about this. We showed sort of where that was. Let's go with, so the tank, let's do tank graphic. This is what we're talking about. So you've got these tanks completely on the other side. They're actually, it's 2,000 feet from Mandalay Bay to the fuel tanks. It's 1,000 feet from the fuel tanks down into the Route 91 Harvest Festival. And actually, if you look directly to the north, directly above the fuel tanks, that is the parking lot for Janet Air. That is where I believe the drones were hovering above. That's why I believe that they're out there checking, because they're like, bullets came from here. Bullets came from high up over here. Yeah, they did. They came from next door, from the drone that was hovering right above fucking Janet Air. That's where they came from. But they can't get on there. That's a top secret facility. So let's go with breach. This is the last part, and this is very interesting because this story just popped up. It was a little bit reported, but then it popped up again today, and I thought that it was very, very strange that this would be there. McCarran's fence breached by people fleeing Las Vegas Strip shooting. About 300 people fleeing the mass shooting at Mandalay Bay managed to break through the security fence surrounding McCarran International on Sunday night, wandering onto an active airfield and brought flights to a halt, airport officials said. The fence was breached in two areas as concertgoers from Route 91 Harvest Festival streamed into the airport looking for a place to hide, airport spokesman Christine Cruz said on Tuesday. At around 10:15, hold on, I lost my thing. At around 10:15 Sunday, just 7 minutes after the gunman Stephen Paddock started shooting, the breach prompted airport officials to close two parallel runways on the airport's western edge closest to the strip, known as 1L19R and 1R19L. I want you to just take that in as you listen. The shooting is not even over yet, and the airport has closed down the two runways closest to Janet Air. They've closed down the runways used by Janet Air, and they've halted flights. The excuse of, we had people on the runway. An hour later, runways 8L26R and 8R26L on the airport's south end were also closed, bringing traffic to a standstill at the nation's 8th busiest airport. The shutdown led to 25 flight diversions on Sunday, with a majority of planes sent to Phoenix. It was unclear how many, but a majority of those planes eventually reached Las Vegas shortly after flights resumed at 12:40 a.m. Monday, Cruz said. Airport personnel guarded the gashed fence until it was repaired at 1:10 a.m. After busting through the security fence, the panicked group scattered across the airfield. About 30 of them managed to get as far as Allegiant Air's maintenance facility on the airport's east end, company spokeswoman said. Once inside, they received food, water, blankets, and a chance to charge their cell phones. Clothes were provided to those whose pants or shirts were torn and snagged by broken security fence. Many others found refuge at facilities closer to the airport's western edge, including Signature Flight Support, which handles some of the private jets passing through McCarran International. Quote, we provided a facility for anybody who needed a place to stay that night with food, water, and some triage, Signature Flight Support General Manager Rita Carrillo says. After several hours of waiting, the group was placed on an airport shuttle bound for an emergency evacuation center at UNLV's Thomas and Mack. So, I know where all those locations are. I know exactly where all those locations are. What I found interesting, this is a Las Vegas Review-Journal story. The owner of the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and this is as far into this part of the story as we're going to go, also owns Sands Corp. And yet Sands Corp is not mentioned in this story as a place where people gathered. It's the closest facility. It's actually next door neighbors to Janet Air. And as a matter of fact, it's the only facility from which we actually have photos of people, if you want to show this Sands. This is from the Sands hangar. Photos taken that night. Go next.
Oh, sorry.
It's a slideshow.
Yeah.
Those are the Sands planes. These are the people getting on that described shuttle. Go next. These are more people in the Sands hangar. You can see the Sands planes in the background. Go next. Now, here's what's interesting. These are people heading in front of the tanks in question, so you can see the tanks in relationship to the size of the people. These are people walking towards the Sands hangar, also walking towards Janet Air. Now, what you don't see here is you don't see people running.
Yeah.
These are people walking, being evacuated to that spot. Now, the thing about the fence getting knocked down, I don't even know where the fuck they'd knock that fence down, because there's no area where there's an open fence even close by. And the fact that that they shut down these runways is very, very fucking suspect. So let's show this. Go to route, and we'll show this. I just wanted to show what we're talking about in terms of evacuation route. Okay, so this is the basic thing. Let's go to marked. This is how the people got to Sands. But more important, so you can see the venue, and you can see the line. But more important, you see a line going from Mandalay to the venue. Because if you were going to set somebody up, and if you wanted your person to be able to escape, and you wanted them to be able to escape back to Janet Air, well, we know that groups of people passed right in front of Janet Air because they had to get to Sands. And we know that people were at Sands. That's the easiest way to have somebody have an escape route that takes them past Janet. Now, the last part about this. People would ask, People have been asking, come back to this, Christian, and then I'll leave it with this. People have been saying, why would the U.S. use this weapon? Why would they use this weapon on U.S. citizens? Why not use it on a battlefield somewhere? Right? Why not use it in some foreign country?
Yeah.
Two answers. First, if you take this drone from the Area 51 or the Tonopah, the testing range out there, you fly it on your Janet airplane, you bring it out at night, you hover it above the Janet Air parking lot. When you're done, you bring it back, you put it in. You have never left the safety of a top secret facility. It's top secret the whole way through. You didn't have to put it on a military plane. You didn't have to file a flight plan. You didn't have to do shit. And as a matter of fact, you don't even have to fly. Maybe they closed them down and a Janet Air flight flew out, but there was a flight there were flights going out from 6 o'clock in the morning the next day anyway. Put it back in the belly of one of your planes that never gets checked, that never has anything, that's got, even the flight attendants have top secret clearance, fly it back, along with whoever did this. And then the question is, why target this?
Yeah.
Why target this? And now I want to show you this slideshow. Squares. And I want you to note that all of these photos that I'm showing, you can look down in the bottom at the legend, they're all the same scale, 200 feet. You'll see that 200 feet thing, and then you'll see the scale. This is Tahrir Square. This was basically where the most recent Egyptian revolution, where all of the people, tens of thousands of people, gathered in the square, and where the police and military decided that they were not going to stop the people from getting out of the square, and the revolution, basically they took over, they had a military coup. Next, this is Maidan Square. This is where the most recent Ukrainian revolution happened, where there were snipers who fired at both police and at protesters, and that not knowing who those snipers were and controlling the narrative, the group that now controls Ukraine was able to take over Ukraine. Let's go next. This is Tiananmen Square. This is where there was almost an uprising in China when we were much younger, and the famous pictures of the tanks that rolled over the guy and killed him when the military had to clear the square themselves to prevent China from being taken over. Next. This is Ghazi Park. This is the place that was occupied recently in Turkey, where the government was able to clear it out before it looked like they were about to have a revolution also in Turkey. Next. This is Zuccotti Park. This was the location of Occupy Wall Street, where it looked like there could be a popular uprising even in the United States until they cleared it. Next. This is the location of the shooting. If you were going to simulate clearing out a square during a popular uprising where there were tens of thousands of civilians in that square, looking at a stage, looking at speakers, you were going to clear it because the police and the military were no longer on your side, and you're a dictator, to prevent yourself from getting overthrown and to clear the square, which is something that dictators have to do. And you were going to have a test of a weapon that could do it. Not only that, but that had all of the things that Maidan had as well, where you could set up people and set up shooters and set up a narrative. This was the perfect test. You could choose the time, you could choose the day, you could do it in your own country where you could control the narrative, because it still is a test. It still is a test, and you have an opportunity to keep it behind a top secret wall. So, you can come back to us. So, where are we?
There we go.
So, we know the facts. I've laid out facts. I've strung some things together that is speculation. But, so I'll do this. I'll tell the story as I believe it happened. I believe Schützen Paddock was chosen. Okay? I believe he was chosen, and I believe that Mary Lou Danley has a connection to Janet Eyre. And I believe that is the connection through which Stephen Paddock was chosen. I believe he was set up. I believe once he was chosen, that a woman was introduced into the mix. I believe that is the mystery woman that they have been reporting that he was with. I believe that his activities, when it relates to his bookings of rooms in Chicago, his bookings of rooms at the Ogden, I believe that that is related to the activity of a 64-year-old man trying to impress and please a young new girlfriend. I believe that those are meant to give him a false sense of security because they are planning to do it at this other music festival anyway. So you set up these music festivals. I believe that she is involved. I believe that they do not know who she is. They do not know where to find her. Part of the reason that she was picked and that he was picked is because he's a loner, he doesn't communicate with anybody, and he would have been hiding his communications with her.
Right.
I believe that there's a reason why Mary Lou Danley was out of the country. I'm not saying that she is involved. I'm not saying she knew anything about it, but if she is associated with Janet Eyre, if she is an air hostess at Janet Eyre, then Stephen Paddock would have been known because they would have known about him through the background check. They could have chosen anybody related. They have surveillance on it would have been normal for there to be surveillance on her even. And for them to do additional background checks. Additionally, when she came back, because she would have had top secret clearance, they could have spirited her away and prevented Las Vegas Metro PD or the FBI from even being able to talk to her. And that would have just been a dead end. They would have said, shut up, this is it. She's got top secret clearance, there's nothing we could do. And they can't talk about it. And I believe that that's what it is. I don't know if there was actually, if it was this woman who was shooting out of there. I believe there were other accomplices. I do. I believe those are probably the friends, right? That were staying at the Ogden as well, or that were supposed to show up, that she was traveling to these music festivals with.
Yeah, who knows?
This is what I believe the story is. Now, that's stringing some things together, but it's stringing things together out of the things that are actually true. This is not about crisis actors. This is not about anything. The device that I'm talking about exists. The device that I'm talking about has been said by the Department of Defense to be something that they highly value. They put their money where their mouth is. The location is there. There's omissions.
Yeah.
The FBI is investigating in the exact area that they would investigate if they thought that shots were coming from that area. Airport is shut down. Even after the shooting stops.
Yeah, this is, especially for the conspiracies, it's very real. You know, I've seen a lot of people talk.
It's real.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people talking about like, oh, this, there's two sides to this. So one, the conspiracy theory people, this is very, very real. Two, for the people that say don't become a conspiracy theorist and say all this stuff. Well, it needs to be there because we need to, just like you said with software, the bugs need to be figured out.
Well, and all I'm asking is, so we've presented all of this evidence, right? I'm like, tell the story then.
Yeah.
You tell the story. Right? Tell the better story because as far as I see it, unless somebody wants to tell me which piece I have not addressed, or is there an additional piece of evidence that you can point to that would refute this? Because to me, it's obvious.
Yeah.
It's very, very fucking obvious to me.
Man, it's crazy.
Now, that's why I actually feel secure in us. We've talked about presenting something, and I had a bit of anxiety. But why I feel secure in presenting this is these people are in the wind and untouchable. We're talking about top secret security clearance. There's nothing they can do. I believe Las Vegas Police Department knows, but what the fuck can they do?
Nobody can do anything.
They'll be prosecuted if they say anything, or if anything gets out about them. It's probably only known at the top level. And they may not even know fully who it is. And top secret clearance is compartmentalized, so even the other people who are working at that facility don't know.
Right.
They wouldn't know either. This is a small group of people who did this. Now, how will I be proven right? It won't be now, but it'll probably be in 5 or 6 years when they will tell us that these weapons exist. Because they're going to use them. they're going to automate the military. To understand what this weapon means, to understand what it would mean to have this weapon working, it's a replacement of all infantry forces. It's to be able to send boots on the ground and not a single American ever gets killed. Because that's what an infantryman is. He's just a weapon. He's a rifle.
Right.
He's the trigger on the rifle. That's what he is. That's all he is. He's nothing without his rifle. Nothing. Without his weapon, he's nothing. This is one of the most groundbreaking innovations. It's completely different.
Yeah, it changes everything.
Changes everything. And that's why it's worth killing 60 people. So, we're going to leave it at that, dude.
Yeah.
We still have Ray. We've got time. We're going to go a little bit over today. Let's do this. We're going to skip the ads for everything today. This was a big one. Thank you for going through this with me. Let's just go ahead. We'll go to break, and then we will come directly back, and we'll go to Ray's interview.